All right, hello everyone. Welcome again to Live Better Longer, the Dog Aging Project. As you heard, this is part of a webinar series about healthy aging from the American Federation for Aging Research and Prevention magazine. I'm Sarah Smith. I'm the editor-in-chief of Prevention. We're a health and wellness magazine and website, and I love what I do because I get to learn something new with every article we publish. And in fact, in our August issue out right now, we have a brief interview with the two experts I'll be talking to today. But I'm really excited to dive in further. If you haven't joined us before for a Live Better Longer webinar, welcome. And to everyone else, it's great to have you back. We are having fascinating conversations with leading experts so that we can share not just the latest research around health and aging, but really understand how to apply it to our lives. AFAR is a leader in supporting aging research. The work they're committed to is literally changing people's lives. And Prevention has a long history of bringing innovative ideas to a wide audience. So I'm thrilled today to be talking to Matt Kaeberlein, the co-director of the Dog Aging Project, and to Kate Creevy, the project's Chief Veterinary Officer. So we can learn today not just about our beloved companions, but about ourselves. And we will have time for Q&A at the end. So again, please feel free to put your questions in the Q&A section, the Q&A box at any time, and we'll get to as many of them as we can. So Matt and Katie, before we really dive into the work that you're doing, I would love to know from each of you what got you interested in this field of research and whether you have a dog yourself. Matt, do you want to start?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Sarah. It's a pleasure to be here with Prevention and AFAR. So I actually got interested in the biology of aging as a graduate student. I did my graduate work with Lenny Guarenti at MIT, and I was at that point still pretty young. So it wasn't really a personal aspect of aging, but it was more, I was really fascinated with the complexity of the biology and the idea that we could understand at a molecular, genetic, biochemical level, what the aging process was. And particularly the implication that most of the declines in function and diseases that are common in developed countries have age as their greatest risk factor. So if we can understand that biology, clearly there's the potential to have a huge impact on human health and longevity, and also companion animal health and longevity. And I've always been a dog person. I grew up with dogs, and so the idea that I could combine, my passion for aging research with my love of dogs and, the hope, honestly, that someday that my own dog would live longer and be healthier was sort of the perfect mix for me. I do have one dog now. His name is Dobby. He's a 10-year-old German Shepherd. And in my humble opinion, he is the best dog in the world. I love him very much.
Of course he is. I bet he's a very good boy. Thank you, Matt. Katie, how about you? Tell us how you got into this and about your own animals.
Thanks, Sarah, and thanks everybody for the opportunity to talk with you about our project today. So I'm Kate Creevy, and I am a small animal internal medicine specialist veterinarian. So not everybody realizes that we have specialty medicine in veterinary medicine, but we do, and I am an internist. And internal medicine, of course, studies organ systems disease and infectious disease. And actually, my first research interest was infectious disease, still the thing I enjoy most in my clinical practice. So I was an early career faculty member at the University of Georgia, where I met Daniel Promislow, who's the third member of the leadership team of the Dog Aging Project. He's a geneticist. And he had become interested in the dog as a model of the genetics of aging in particular, because of this fascinating observation that within the species of dogs, small breed dogs live longer than large breed dogs, and dog breeds are known to have certain predictable or at least more prevalent diseases of aging based on their breed background. And he approached me about it as an early career internist. And there is not a specialty of gerontology in veterinary medicine. And so this was not something that I had ever considered as a career component. But as it turns out, as an internist, my patients are old dogs. My patients who have organ system disease are primarily old dogs. I see old dogs every day in my practice. And so it was something that I started with because I thought it was an interesting opportunity to learn more about it. And the further and further along I got in this area, the more and more interesting it has become to me. So it was a really fortunate opportunity to meet Daniel, and then eventually through Daniel to meet Matt and move forward to the development of this dog aging project that we'll be speaking with you about today. And I do have 2 dogs. I currently have one mixed breed dog, is a pit bull mix, and he's delightful. He's 13 now, so he's become sort of the elder statesman at our house, which is comical because he is not a very stately dog. And I also have a younger dog, a border collie. She is 5 and she keeps me very active. So we have great dogs at our house as well.
That's great. Thanks for sharing that. I have a 14-year-old dog, so she's the elder stateswoman in our house, and I have enrolled her in the dog aging project, and
Great.
so I'm sure we'll talk more about do that for our audience too later. But we're citizen scientists now in our home, so thank you both for creating that for us. But I'd love for the audience to learn, we'll talk a lot about it, but I know that you have a really great video about the project. So I think we'll watch that and then we'll talk some more.
At the Dog Aging Project, we dream big and we think big. We want to understand the lives of dogs across the country. Are they snuggle buddies or working dogs, beloved rescues or pedigree show dogs? Do they run their hearts out or keep a steady pace on walks around town? Every dog is unique, and we want to get to know yours. The Dog Aging Project is the most ambitious canine health study in the world. Our team of scientists and veterinarians is partnering with tens of thousands of dogs and their humans across the United States. We're gathering information about the health and life experiences of all kinds of dogs, young and old, mixed breed and purebred, those who are healthy and those with chronic illnesses. What do they eat? Where do they play? Are they members of a pack or king of the castle? We are interested in dogs from all walks of life. As we begin to understand how biology, lifestyle, and environment affect health and longevity in dogs, we can use this information to help our canine companions live the best lives possible. We want to maximize what we call health span, the period of life spent in good health and free from chronic disease. And that's not all. What we learn about dog health and longevity will make a profound contribution to our understanding of human health. Like us, many dogs experience physical and cognitive declines. They are susceptible to the same diseases that we are, like cancer, diabetes, and arthritis. Dogs share our environment, and like humans, they have access to a sophisticated healthcare system. By studying the aging process in dogs, we can discover better ways to predict, diagnose, treat, and prevent these illnesses. Our participants truly are citizen scientists, collecting data for our research project through surveys about their dog's health and life experiences. We provide tools and support so the dog owners can take body measurements, submit canine DNA samples, or record their dogs doing everyday activities. These dogs continue to live and play at home with their families, while our team uses this information to unlock the secrets of healthy aging. But the Dog Aging Project isn't just a research study. We're a community. Members of our project are building lifelong relationships with fellow dog lovers and sharing all the milestones they reach along the way. Dogs have a lot to teach us, not just about health, but about compassion, responsibility, and unconditional love. We never have quite enough time with our dogs, and when they're gone, we're never quite the same. What if we could help our best friends live longer, healthier lives? That's what the Dog Aging Project is all about. Will you join us?
That was great. I love that as an overview. I'm so glad you all have that to share with people. Matt, can you start us off? Tell us where you are within the project. You know, how's it going?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think it's going well. So we, as the video sort of illustrated, there are really two major goals, I would say, of the dog aging project. One is to understand the aging process in dogs. What are the most important environmental and genetic factors that influence health as dogs are getting older? And then the second is to take that information and ask whether or not we can actually increase healthy lifespan in dogs. And so if you think about it that way, there are sort of two parts of the dog aging project. One is a very large longitudinal study of aging that is really following dogs throughout their lives and trying to understand as much as we can about the aging process. So, over the last 2.5 years, we've really been building the infrastructure to allow that longitudinal study to occur. And now we're at the point where we've actually got dogs in the study. So we have about 32,000 dogs in the longitudinal study, and we can talk more about what that actually means if you're interested. But now we actually have the dogs in the study, and the owners are giving us data, and we're actually able to start analyzing the data, which is really exciting. So I think we're just at kind of the tip of the iceberg there, but there's going to be a lot of really cool observations coming out of that study over the next couple of years. And then the smaller part of the dog aging project is a clinical trial to actually ask whether or not a drug called rapamycin can slow aging, increase lifespan, and improve health span in dogs. And just like with the longitudinal study, we've been building the infrastructure for that. I think we actually have the first dogs scheduled to come into the clinic for the rapamycin clinical trial, which we call TRIAD. Stands for Test of Rapamycin in Aging Dogs. So that will start next month. So we'll actually have dogs in the clinic for the start of that trial. So in some ways, we're kind of at the very beginning, but I think the last 2.5 years have been really, really important to allow us to really build the foundation to now move forward at full speed and start to really make some cool discoveries.
Right. Yeah, that's exciting to have so many dogs ready for you to start studying them. Yeah, I think I've heard you or your team say that dogs are science's best friend. Can you speak to that? How are they helping us in science in general?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think for aging in particular, dogs are a really powerful animal in which to study the aging process. And there's a couple of big ways that dogs, pet dogs in particular, can allow us to, I think, understand aging in a much more complete way than studying aging either in humans or in the laboratory. So companion dogs, pet dogs share our environment, which is something we can't recapitulate in a laboratory, right? In fact, we try to control the environment as much as possible. But obviously the environment is extremely important for the aging process in both people and dogs. So we can understand that in our pets. But dogs also age, about 7 to 10 times faster than people do, which means that, we can actually learn a lot about aging and importantly, do clinical trials to see whether we can actually increase healthy lifespan in pet dogs in a time frame that's feasible, right? So a clinical trial in dogs that would take 3 years would take 3 decades in humans, right? To look at the same outcomes. So it's just an accelerated aging process. And then of course, people love their dogs, as we've already talked about. I love my dog, you love your dog, Katie loves her dogs, right? So there's an aspect here of, an animal that, if you look at the statistics, at least half of us consider part of our family. So there's huge intrinsic value if we're able to help our family members live longer, better lives.
Right. That's really fascinating and interesting. Katie, will you tell us about your involvement as a vet, why it's so important to have your expertise here in these trials and all the pieces of the project?
Sure. Yeah. So I think one of the things about it is, of course, as I mentioned, my patients are old dogs. And so while I am very excited about the translational potential of the dog aging project on human health, I'm really excited about the value immediately to the dogs, not just the dogs I own, but the dogs that I care for in clinical practice. And so I'm excited to participate in discovering these findings about the aging process in dogs because I'm excited to apply them. The things that are particularly unique and exciting about the dog aging project, and Matt has already alluded to this, is that these are dogs living in people's homes. And so in addition to the information we can learn because their homes are diverse, we have to interact with the owners of the dogs to get that information. And veterinarians interact with dogs and dog owners every day. So veterinarians are accustomed to and excited about the human-animal bond. We are interested in working with and partnering with owners of our patients. Our patients are the animals and the clients are the owners. And we are always interested in partnering with those clients in the care of these animals. And so as we're trying to roll out this complex survey across the country, we have a number of veterinarians on the team who help us navigate that very special relationship between the caregiver of a dog and the medical professional that they interact with. And we provide expertise in how to talk with clients about health, the kinds of things that dog owners do easily in the home or struggle to do in the home, the kinds of tasks that are reasonable to ask dog owners to do with their dogs. And then when it comes to collecting biological samples from these dogs, many of the dogs will go to their local family veterinarian for the collection of their samples for research. And so the veterinarians on our team can provide insight and support to our partners in private practice who are asked to participate in this research study by collecting samples. So there are a number of veterinarians on the team, including senior folks, experienced folks, middle career folks, and early career folks. And it's really a dynamic, wonderful group of veterinarians. Every time we get together, it's one of my best meetings of the week.
That's really great. That's exciting. So Matt, this is a really big project, as we've both discussed, involving tons of data. Well, will you tell us a little bit about how you're collecting? Katie was talking about the samples, the vets and the things that people are answering, but tell us a little bit more about how you're collecting and then you're going to analyze it.
Sure. Yeah. So from the owner perspective, owners can nominate their dogs by coming to the website. They complete a very short 3 or 4 question form, and then they'll be invited to come to the website and create their owner portal. And when they do that, they will then complete what we call the health and life experiences survey. And that's the first kind of data that we collect from the owners. And it's a fairly extensive survey instrument that captures as much information about the dog's health history, home life, environment as we reasonably can. And so that's where we get the 32,000 plus dogs that are in the longitudinal study. Those are all dogs where the owner has completed that survey instrument. And that's really the foundational piece of data. And then owners are asked to upload an electronic medical record once they've completed HLES. And so once they complete HLES, they are part of what we call the Dog Aging Project PAC. And if they are also able to upload electronic medical records, they then become eligible for these sampled cohorts, which is what Katie was alluding to, where dogs will go into, if they're selected for one of the sampled cohorts, they will go into their veterinarian. The veterinarian will collect blood samples, fecal samples, things like that, that we then analyze, that we can collect data on metabolites in the blood or microbiome, things like that. So then we also get genome sequences for 10,000 dogs from the pack. So those are the kinds of data that come in. And then we have a very large and sophisticated, and honestly, I don't completely understand all the inner workings of the data core for the project, which is in collaboration with the Broad Institute in Boston, where all of the data is then collected and stored in the cloud for analysis. And then once we get there, our plan is every year, we will annotate that data and make it available to the scientific community for other groups to then be able to access the data. So it's a lot of different data types that come in. And our team, each person on the team has their own expertise, and they're responsible for performing their own analyses. And then, as I said, our intention is this will in fact be an open science project. That was our intention from the very beginning. And our goal is to make this as widely available as possible so that all sorts of smart people out there can ask questions that we either didn't think of or don't have time to ask, and really make the most out of the data that we're collecting.
That's really interesting. So we've got citizen scientists and open science. It's really going to be a huge benefit, I can tell. Katie, can you tell us more about the dogs in the study? I mean, you explained how they're at home with their people, but what else should we know about them? Who are they?
So it's really important to us that the dogs in the study represent the dogs in the country. And so we are trying to enroll big ones, small ones, old ones, young ones. There are a couple of misconceptions because it's the dog aging project, people think we're not interested in puppies. We're very interested in puppies because the experiences that puppies have in their puppyhood could profoundly impact their later years. And we won't know that if we don't have puppies in the trial. So we're very excited about puppies. At the moment, we have ended up with basically 50% male and 50% female dogs. So that's good. We wanted that. We also currently have basically exactly 50% purebred and 50% mixed breed dogs, which we're excited about. We wanted to make sure that we had a robust representation of mixed breed dogs. And so the breeds that are available include all the breeds you've ever heard of and some that you probably haven't. We have all of the AKC breeds represented, but we also have had to recognize breeds that aren't even established within the AKC in this country because we've had people who've acquired dogs from other places in very unusual breeds. We have dogs from all of the states, and we are continuing to seek nominations to expand all of those populations. Again, especially puppies, looking for puppies, but we also will take dog nominations of any kind still.
That's great. All right, puppy people, enroll your dogs. You know, Matt alluded to this, but are you asking for the same exact information from all the dogs, and then some are going to be part of smaller studies? Is that they're going to be based on the studies based on their breed or something else? How's that working?
Yeah, so as Matt alluded to, we have this very basic comprehensive survey that's the first step for everybody. Everybody who joins the Dog Aging Project joins by becoming a member of the pack and filling out this very comprehensive survey about their dog's life and home experiences. And then from that group, we currently have a few named cohorts, the ones where we're going to get the DNA samples from 10,000 dogs. That's one big group. And that represents all sorts of dogs, big ones, small ones, male, female, old, young, different breeds, different parts of the country, trying to be very representative. We have 1,000 dogs in this group that Matt mentioned, called the precision cohort, where they'll have blood and urine samples, fecal samples, and hair samples collected from by their veterinarians locally, and then the smaller triad group. All of those cohorts are open to all sorts of dogs except for triad, which is limited to dogs who are medium to large in size and at least 7 years of age. So we're trying to study dogs in the latter third of their lifespan, basically, in the triad study. So we really, in our current cohorts, are welcoming all sorts of dogs. Within those groups, the owners are asked to complete this lengthy survey and update it annually. And then we have a number of tasks and surveys that owners complete throughout the year. So we have a particular survey about their dog's cognitive changes as it ages, and we ask everybody in the pack to fill that out once a year. We have a number of tasks we ask owners to do at home, timing their dogs running up the stairs or timing their dogs jogging down the hallway, and we'll ask people to do that annually, again, to track their dogs as they age. Over time, we do hope to also build in specific targeted questionnaires or targeted tasks for the groups like you mentioned. We might find a particular breed of dogs where we want to analyze a particular blood element. We might find dogs whose owners report a particular diagnosis that the dog has had, and we want to send them a particular survey related to that diagnosis. But because everybody joins by starting with this most comprehensive survey and becoming a member of our pack, we can easily identify these small subgroups because of all of the comprehensive information that the owners have already shared with us. So it creates a lot of opportunities going forward to ask targeted questions.
Right, that makes sense. Matt, can you tell us why, as part of these questionnaires, you're asking not just about a dog's health history, but also about its current life?
Sure. So there's a couple of points to make here. So one is that if you just look in the veterinary records, right, you miss all the information about the dog's environment, right? Because that typically isn't going to be captured in a veterinary record. And that obviously is really important for understanding the relationship between environmental factors and health outcomes. And the other important aspect here is this was always envisioned as a longitudinal study. And what I mean by that is that we want to follow these dogs over time so that we can understand whether things that happened, now impact health outcomes 2 or 3 years from now. And so because it's designed as a longitudinal study, we want to capture that information, not just about what's happened in the past, but what's happening right now for every dog in its home environment. And then as Katie mentioned, every year, owners will be asked to complete or at least update this survey, both the cognitive survey and the health and life experiences survey, so that we can see how the dog's home life and environment is changing over time. And then over the next 5-10 years, because dogs age so quickly, we'll capture big parts of individual dogs' entire lives and be able to correlate, maybe a particular type of diet early in life or a particular environmental exposure was associated with better or worse health outcomes or specific diseases later in life. So that's why we don't just limit it to the veterinary medical records, but really try to capture as much of that information as possible.
Right. That's really interesting. Makes sense. Matt, can you also, I thought it was so interesting earlier when you pointed out how, dogs age, I think you said 7 times faster than people. And, that's so helpful for seeing, what happens in their lives and how they age. But how does that correlate with our idea of, dog years, that we always thought it meant that they were 7 times older than their, can you talk about what that means in real life and how that matters?
Sure. I mean, it's kind of squishy, right? So this idea that one human year is 7 dog years, I heard that when I was a kid, and I think it's a nice concept, because what we're really saying is dogs age about 7 times faster than people do. In reality, it's not what we would call a linear relationship. In other words, 2 doesn't equal 14 and 4 doesn't equal 28 all the way through life. We don't completely understand really the exact relationship between human biological aging and dogs' biological aging. But the best data right now is that it's probably, a faster or a larger relationship early in life. And in other words, maybe early in life, 1 human year is 14 dog years. And then as the dog is getting older, biologically, that kind of slows down. So later in life, maybe it's 1 human year is 3 dog years. There's some interesting new, what people call clocks, biological aging clocks that are being developed, which are sort of molecular signatures that we think reflect the rate of biological aging. And those clocks kind of fit that idea that I just mentioned, that early in life, dogs are much more accelerated than people in their rate of biological aging, and late in life, the rates become closer. The last thing I'll add is I think this is a really important concept for people that don't think about aging. We talk about chronological age, right, which is just your birthday, like how many years old are you? Chronological age, time, is not the same as biological age. Biological age, what we mean is the rate at which these biological processes that are aging are happening. And that can be different from chronological age. In other words, one 50-year-old person biologically might be younger or older than another 50-year-old person. And that's a really important concept to understand, when we're talking about, dog years versus human years. That relationship, 1 to 7, is really the relationship for biological age. Time, chronological age, isn't any different, obviously. But I think it's just important to explicitly state that concept.
Yeah, that's interesting, really helpful. Also, when you think about your own dogs, that no, she's not maybe 97 or 6 or whatever, but she's older than she once was, my dog in particular. Katie, could you tell us about age-related conditions that dogs develop that maybe are similar to those in humans, and how we currently treat these, and what the Dog Aging Project might help us understand further about that? Big question, I know, but
yeah, sure. So one of the things that's really interesting is that dogs develop almost all of the same age-related diseases as people. And so dogs do develop weight gain and overweight status and obesity. Dogs develop osteoarthritis, joint pain. Dogs develop kidney failure. Dogs can develop with chronic liver disease. And so dogs are subject to the same kinds of things that happen to us in almost every case. One notable exception is that dogs don't really experience myocardial infarction, heart attack. Dogs don't get heart attack the way that people do. Dogs get other kinds of heart disease, but it's very, very interesting that they basically never get a myocardial infarction, which is a hugely, hugely common disorder in people, particularly in the developed world. And so it's really interesting to study both the things that are similar about dogs and then this one really remarkable, notable exception that they're not at risk for. Currently, the way we treat dogs is very much the way you yourself are treated, through an individual conversation about an individual dog with an individual dog owner and veterinarian. And choices that are made for that dog are a function of that dog's current symptoms and disease, and also that owner's goals for that dog. And we can treat dogs with all the same things that are available for the treatment of human diseases, including dietary management and lifestyle management, but also drugs and surgeries up to and including radiation therapy and neurosurgery and brain surgery, and all of those things are available. The fascinating thing about dogs is, just like people, we treat them as individuals. And they're one of the few species where that's really true. We frequently manage production animals. If you think about managing cattle or managing a herd of goats, that if they have a problem, they're frequently thought of as a herd. But a dog is thought of, as Matt has already said, as a member of our family. And so when they become ill or have a need, their need is individually managed. People who are dog owners on this call might know, if you have 2 dogs in your own household and you love them equally, you don't necessarily manage them the same way, right? One of them plays more than the other. One of them gets a certain kind of food. One of them is allergic to things. One of them is afraid of thunderstorms. You manage them individually. You meet their individual needs because they are individuals in your family. And that's how we care for dogs medically as well. What I hope the Dog Aging Project will enable us to do is do all of that better. Veterinary medicine is a wonderful field, and I enjoy being a veterinarian. And at the same time, I know that we are somewhat behind our colleagues in human medicine with the access to research that we have had over the years. And so our discoveries and our understanding of disease and the effectiveness of therapy lags behind our colleagues in human medicine. And a study of this size, I hope, can really be a game changer for the profession and give us access to larger amounts of reliable data about diverse diseases of dogs and their treatment.
That's great. Really interesting. Matt, will you tell us about the rapamycin research? What is that drug? What's its potential? How does it, fit in with what we've just been talking about?
Sure. Yeah. So rapamycin is a really interesting molecule. It actually was first identified from soil samples on Easter Island, which is also called Rapa Nui. That's where the drug gets its name from, and it's produced by bacteria there, probably produced to act as an antifungal against fungal species in the soil. So that's how rapamycin was first studied, and it's sort of in some ways an unfortunate evolution of the drug. It was first studied at very high doses as an antifungal and then as an immune suppressant. So, and that's clinically what it's mostly been used as in people to prevent organ transplant rejection. And that's what it was first approved by FDA for. Sort of about 15, 20 years ago, from studies from several labs, it was observed that at lower doses, rapamycin can increase lifespan in laboratory animals, and it appeared to delay most of the functional declines that go along with aging. This was first done in very simple animals like yeast and nematode worms and fruit flies, and then in mice. And that's when I think people really started to pay attention, because it turned out you could start treating mice with rapamycin at about the mouse equivalent of 60 years old. This is that biological aging clock. So 2-year-old mice in the lab are about the same as 60-year-old people biologically, and still get big effects on lifespan. And since then, many of us have seen that in mice, rapamycin given in old age not only increases lifespan, but it reverses periodontal disease and liver disease and kidney disease and heart disease, and pretty much every tissue where you look at, including the brain. You can either slow the aging process in mice or actually partially reverse it. Take an old mouse and make it function more like a young mouse. So that's probably the gold standard, I would say, in the field of aging research for an intervention that seems to either delay or in some cases partially reverse the aging process when started in middle age. And so then, several years ago, when we were first starting to think about, what intervention does it make sense to test in dogs first, rapamycin kind of rose to the top of the list. And, I started this discussion by talking about the way that the drug evolved as an immune suppressant at very high doses. That was the big concern when we first started thinking about testing rapamycin in a clinical trial in pet dogs. There was this concern about safety because the drug among clinical circles does have sort of a bad reputation for side effects, because again, it's mostly been used at high doses in organ transplant patients. There's now an accumulating body of evidence that at lower doses, there really aren't significant side effects at all in people. And then we've done a couple of small scale clinical trials in dogs as well, to really be sure that testing this drug to see if it can slow aging in dogs, we can do that in a safe way. And so now we're at the point where we've got the clinical trial started, we've got the study designed, and we're really, I think, 3 years from now, that's the length of the clinical trial, we'll have a pretty good idea. Does rapamycin have similar effects in pet dogs as to what has been seen in mice? And if it does, that's probably the equivalent of a couple of years of extra healthy longevity in a large middle-aged dog. So that's what we're testing right now in the Triad clinical trial.
That would be a big headline, I think, if there's a way to have your dogs stay in your family even a couple of years longer.
Absolutely.
I mean, are we someday, I know you can't answer this, but are we someday going to be people going to be taking rapamycin along with their dogs, and we're all just going to have longer?
I can't answer that because yes, there are already people doing that. There's this whole community, believe it or not, of people who are self-experimenting with rapamycin and other anti-aging interventions. I think what you're really asking is, will we get to the point where a clinical trial has been done and we can really have clinical confidence that rapamycin or something else slows aging in dogs and people? I think we'll get there in dogs. Again, rapamycin is the first drug that's being tested. There are now other groups, and there's a company that has been founded to actually test other things in dogs for effects on biological aging. I really think it's just a matter of time. I'm a scientist, so I can't say with 100% certainty that anything is going to happen, but I would be shocked to my core if at least some of what we know about biological aging in laboratory animals doesn't work the same way in dogs and people. And so I absolutely believe that we'll get there. I don't know if rapamycin, you have to do the clinical trial, and there's lots of reasons a clinical trial might fail. So I don't know what the result's going to be with rapamycin, but we'll get there. I'm completely confident of that. It's going to be a longer path to proving that you can affect aging in humans, but we'll get there too. And I think within the next decade, we'll at least have some aging related intervention in the clinic for an aging endpoint. So yeah, it's really exciting time in the field. And I think the general public doesn't really know where the field's at and how close we are to actually having a clinical impact. So it's fun and exciting and kind of crazy because there are some interesting personalities in the field. But yeah, it's exciting to see where the field's at, and I think where we're going to go.
Yeah, that's really, I agree. I don't think it's bubbled up to the surface yet. So everyone listening in today has a little glimpse of what's coming down the road, probably. Yeah, but I'd love to hear from you both, while we're talking about, the future, sort of how has this project helped you understand human aging even more? How is this maybe going to translate or possibly translate? So
I can start. So I think you've kind of heard where we're at in the project right now, and I think I said it where it's kind of the tip of the iceberg, right, in terms of the data that we've got and the data we're analyzing. So to be quite honest, I don't know that I've learned a lot about human aging yet. I think over the next few years that we're going to learn a lot about canine aging, and that's going to be hypothesis generating for human aging, right? I think, there is this question, anytime we find a mechanistic understanding or a correlative understanding of something that affects aging or age-related diseases in dogs, we don't know that that's true in people, right? You have to then go and look and ask the question whether that same relationship holds across species. So I view the dog aging project in many ways as hypothesis generating about human aging, but it tells us where to look. And just to give an example, let's say that we find a particular gene is strongly associated with lifespan or health span in dogs. We can then ask, is there evidence that the same gene is associated with lifespan and health span in people, and test these relationships that way. I think if we're successful at showing that rapamycin or something else slows aging, increases lifespan, increases health span in dogs, that will have a big impact. It won't prove that rapamycin works the same way in people, but it'll have a big impact in the way that people think about aging. I think, as we already discussed, among most of the general public, it hasn't bubbled up to the surface, right? That aging is a biological process that's malleable and can be modified. I think if people understand that aging can be slowed in their pet dog, that's going to have a big impact on the way that people think about the biology of aging and the human aging process. So it's a little bit indirect, but I think it could be pretty important.
Right. That's a really interesting point, that it's not just the biological changes, it's sort of rethinking how we think about aging. It's many steps, probably. Katie, did you have anything to add on this?
That actually is the biggest thing I've learned about aging, and by being a part of this. I didn't obviously come to this work with a background in aging, and particularly in human aging, and the notion that aging is a phenomenon like any other biological or medical phenomenon, that it is not just inevitable, non-varying. First of all, it unfolds quite differently in different individuals. The aging experience unfolds quite differently in different individuals. And as soon as you realize that that's true, the things that we can do to modify our experience of aging, it becomes clear that those would also be different in different individuals. And for me, that's not the way I had thought about it before. And I happen to be a veterinary researcher, so I'm confident that most people in the general public don't think of it as this, as Matt said, malleable thing. It's an event or a phenomenon that we can influence. And even though we do things to influence it, right? I mean, people do things to try to promote their own healthy future by exercising and thinking about what they eat and those kinds of things. And what you're doing is you're modifying your aging trajectory, which means your aging trajectory is modifiable. But we don't always think of it in those terms. And so I think that I agree with Matt that the ability to communicate that this is something over which we have at least some degree of control will change the way that people think about the inevitability of the aging process.
That's really interesting. So it's not like we have answers yet for do this thing that's good for dogs for us, but it's really a part of a long process for all of us. It's really interesting. Katie, can you tell us more about, as a vet, what you're looking forward to learning as the data is analyzed? What would make your job as a vet even better?
Yeah, so I think it's really this concept of health span that has come up several times. Again, as an internist, a lot of my work is see a patient who has an ailment, intervene in a way that helps minimize the ailment, reverse the ailment, fix the ailment. But that's not what any of us wants. What we want for our dogs is to not get ailments, right? What we want for ourselves is to lengthen the period of time that everything's working well and shrink and shorten the period of time when diseases are occurring. And so I think that notion of health span, if we learn things that I can impart into the clinical patients that enables them to have a longer period of good health before diseases, specifically diseases of aging, begin to occur, that would be very impactful for the dogs in my household for sure, but also for all the dogs in my practice.
How about you, Matt? Is there other areas that you think have particularly exciting potential that are worth bringing up?
Well, I think, I think we've already talked about the impact that this could have on the way that people perceive the biology of aging. I mean, I think, this isn't exactly what you asked, but if I had one concern, right, my concern is that in terms of interventions, we're testing rapamycin, and as I alluded to, there's a lot of reasons why a clinical trial might fail, even if the intervention works. So my hope is that what we're doing really is laying the foundation for allowing whether it's us or other people, to expand on what we're doing, and in the specific case of testing interventions, to test other interventions. So in some ways, I think of the Dog Aging Project, at least the triad trial, as really proof of principle that you can do this, right? That you can actually test an intervention that we hypothesize affects the aging process in companion dogs, and showing that you can do it will spur additional testing of interventions. Because as I already mentioned, I absolutely believe that it is feasible to maximize health span in dogs. I think the other thing I just want to reemphasize is what Katie said, which is that it's partly about increasing lifespan, but it's mostly about maximizing that healthy period of life and pushing the chronic diseases of aging back as far as possible. And I think we can really be the leaders in demonstrating that that's feasible and that this can actually be done. And I think if we're successful at that, it'll have a very large impact, not just on the field, but on companion animal health and human health.
Right. And on as the health span sounds like it's sort of another way of saying the quality of life too, right? For both for dogs, but also for ourselves, should we get to the point where those hypotheses you mentioned, start being questioned and answered. Is there anything, we're going to get to questions pretty soon, but is there anything else about the connection between human and dog aging that I haven't asked that you think is worth bringing up?
I think the one thing I would mention that, is not something we're directly studying yet, but that we're interested in is what you just said, the connection. So, we're studying dog health and aging in the dogs, but clearly there is this interaction between the owners and the dogs, right? And there's a biological component to that. So there's good evidence that, people interacting with their dogs affects the physiology of both the dog and the person. So I would be surprised if there aren't impacts on the health and aging of the dog and the health and aging of the person from those interactions. And I think that's a really interesting and important area of biology that hopefully we'll be able to contribute to in the future. And it's something that we're sort of interested in thinking about ways that we might be able to contribute to that.
Oh, that's really interesting too. Yeah. Katie, since we're talking so much about aging, I think it's, we all, of course, have the experience of losing a dog or knowing that's going to happen because that's the nature of things. And, I just thought it might be interesting to hear from you on, that heartbreaking time, but is there anything that the Dog Aging Project is teaching you, or maybe just from your practice, about approaching that time?
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. The only thing wrong with dogs as the perfect companion for humanity is that they don't live long enough, right? Other than that, they're perfect. And I think that experience is shared by all dog owners. The experience of losing a dog that you love, it's devastating, and it impacts your family and it impacts your life in ways that are difficult to name in some instances. So we certainly know that part of a longitudinal study of aging depends upon the fact that when these cherished companions come to die, we need to be able to ask their owners what happened. And we've already shown that the owners of dogs in the Dog Aging Project are extremely generous in telling us about that experience. So all members of the pack whose dogs come to die are asked if they're willing to tell us about it. And if they are given an opportunity to explain what happened, both through a survey that gives us data we can easily analyze, and then also in their own words. And people write very lengthy and thoughtful and descriptive and compelling narratives of that experience. And there's a lot we can learn from that. Again, we can learn a lot about physiology and biology and aging and the experience of death, but we can also learn a whole lot about the human-animal bond and what might be the potential impact on the family and the individual who owned that dog when the dog comes to die. And I think the fact that we're able to get owners to volunteer this information for us, and they're interested in it and committed to doing so, creates a huge trove of information that we're just beginning to analyze.
That's a really hopeful thought, to think that in this hard time, the experience that someone will read it and learn from it, and it might, help other people. That's really powerful.
I think that actually is part of the reason people are so excited to tell us about it, is because they want to redeem the experience of the loss by turning it into an experience of sharing. And it's very generous. Yeah,
it is. And I have to say, as someone who's filled out, the questionnaires, it's also very fun to think about your dog in this, it's almost like answering a questionnaire about yourself. It's fun to answer those questions about your dog. And so when you get to the sad part of it, it's also really meaningful. So before we get to questions, and while we wait for your exciting research to continue and be analyzed, do you have any piece of advice that you two would give to all the dog lovers today to help their dogs live their best lives? Matt,
Go give your dog a hug and a kiss. That's what I'm going to do when I get off this call.
Me too.
I'm not a veterinarian, so Katie can give the veterinary advice.
Okay.
Well, I'm going to say the things we always say: eat less and exercise more, but also go give your dog a hug and a kiss, because I do think that the social impact on your dog of that kind of attention, and the social impact on you of that kind of interaction is a valuable thing. And it's hard to quantify the physiology behind it, but I do believe that it's a valuable thing.
That's great. Yeah, thank you. All right, I'm going to take some questions here. So folks who have more, please put them in the Q&A. But we had one come in about gray hair, that their dog's hair started to turn gray at about 7 years old. So that's interesting. How does a dog's graying hair correspond with humans? And can you judge how old a dog is? I know my dog's face has gone from brown to gray to white. So what are we looking at there? What do we know?
Yeah, so that's actually a really interesting question, because the rate at which and the age, the chronological age at which dogs begin to gray is widely variable, far more variable than it appears to be in people. I mean, we certainly all know the occasional person who had gray hair very early, or a shock of gray hair and those sorts of things. But in dogs, there seems to be much more of a spectrum across which these graying changes occur. And we don't yet know in what way that is related or not related to things happening at a cellular level on the inside. For instance, is it simply a hair coat change and an appearance change, or is it a reflection of other physiologic components? And we don't yet know the answer to that, but it is an interesting observation how variable it is across different types of dogs.
Yeah, and I'll just add, from the biological aging perspective, I don't think it's completely clear how much hair graying really reflects the underlying biology of aging. I mean, certainly it's age associated, but as Katie said, it's also variable, and that's true in people and it's true in mice. So I don't think hair graying is a very good predictor of biological health during aging, because it's so variable. But I do think that there are a variety of appearance related features that together may be more predictive for biological aging. And this has been studied in people a little bit through looking at facial features and using machine learning to pick out specific features of your face that might tell you something about your current health status and maybe your aging process. In principle, that could also be applied to dogs. And we're not doing that now, but I think it's a direction that we might go in the future.
Interesting. A lot of interesting questions. What about, someone wanted to know about dementia in dogs and how you maybe tell that that's happening, but also how that fits in with aging here.
Yeah, so absolutely. Dementia, cognitive changes in dogs as they age is definitely a phenomenon that we recognize clinically. Dogs experience a phenomenon we call canine cognitive dysfunction, which has many parallels with dementia, senile dementia in people, and is associated with loss of appropriate social interactions, apparent loss of memory, loss of appropriate navigation, and loss actually of the 24-hour cycle. They're asleep at the wrong times and awake at the wrong times. And so it can be pretty disruptive for people in the home. And we don't currently have great ways to manage that in clinical practice. We have a few suggestions that we can offer to people who are experiencing that with their dogs, but we are definitely tracking cognitive aging in the dogs of the Dog Aging Project through the cognitive survey that's being administered to all of the owners of dogs in the pack on an annual basis. And Matt has an ancillary project that we're working on discovering a little bit more detail about dogs whose survey information suggests that they are achieving or reaching that point of cognitive decline. I don't know if you want to share any more about that, Matt.
Yeah, I'll just add, what Katie said is correct, that this is a growing area of interest for the project, and that we just got this grant from the National Institute of Health funded to look in detail about particularly the relationship between dementia in dogs and markers of dementia and Alzheimer's disease in people. So that'll be something that we're studying in depth. The other point I wanted to make is with rapamycin in particular, the cognitive domain is one of the areas, at least in the mouse studies, where the effects of rapamycin are particularly pronounced. So both in normal aging and then in every major mouse model of Alzheimer's disease, rapamycin has been shown to either delay cognitive decline or in many cases actually reverse cognitive decline. So it's something that we are going to track as part of the triad study in dogs. And there are also a couple of small scale clinical trials. Finally, I've been arguing for years for this in people for Alzheimer's disease and rapamycin. So it's a pretty interesting connection there and possible therapeutic.
Very interesting. Thank you. We have a question about social determinants and dog aging. For example, in humans, low income zip codes are associated with higher mortality rates. And are you looking at these factors for the dogs?
So yes, we are. understanding as much as we can about the social environment of our participant dogs, including the geography and the built environment, as well as the owner's backgrounds and the owner's age and the owner's experiences. We are a dog study. We're not a human subjects research component yet. And so we are not asking owners very detailed information about their lives, although at a future time, we may expand to direct human research with the owners, asking them specific questions about their own lives. We are also interested in the social environment with respect to the nature and number of people and other animals in the home, because we do think that there is likely to be an impact on the dog's aging experience if they are the only dog versus part of a household with other dogs, whether there are children in the home and those kinds of things. And so, yes, we expect that those factors will affect dogs in potentially parallel or potentially different ways than the way they affect people.
You know, we've had a number, since we don't have a ton of time, I want to pull a few things together. A number of people are asking about, you know, the effect of different lifestyle or physical factors in a dog. So I just wonder if you could touch on whether these are things that you're going to be tracking, that there will someday be data on, is like the kind of food that a dog is eating, whether the dog is neutered, and whether you're going to be able to track litter mates. Are these things we'll know more about?
So those are great questions that we're very interested in. Diet is huge. Not just whether or not a dog is spayed or castrated, but the age at which that decision was made is something we're very interested in. We don't currently have a paired litter mate study, but it is something we've talked about, is specifically adding and recruiting a way to track litter mates who were raised in different homes, particularly dogs who were acquired from shelters and might have been raised in very different homes. And so that is something we're really interested in, not something we can easily do within our current cohort. But yes, to all of those, we think they're very important and we're looking into them very diligently.
Yeah, and I just add,
Great.
you know, I think particularly with things like diet, you know, there are very strongly held opinions out there. And if you look on the internet, you can find people who will argue at the top of their lungs for all sorts of different diets. There's just not a lot of really good data, I think, on the relationship between different kinds of diets or how often the dog is fed and health outcomes later in life. So I think that's an area where I'm particularly enthusiastic that we'll be able to add some value, because our study by far will be the longest study to correlate dietary choices that the owners are making for the dogs and health outcomes later in life. And so there will actually be some data to start to address, you know, some of these very strongly held opinions that often aren't based on data right now.
Right. That'll be really great to have. I'm going to ask you, Matt, one more question. A couple people have asked a couple questions about rapamycin. So I'll ask you those. It'll be sort of our last question, I think. And then I know there are people also asking about how do I get my dog enrolled. So we will address that at the very end. But before we do that, could you tell us again, you know, where does rapamycin come from? Is it created in a lab? And someone else is wondering about patents for it. You know, if you could just give us a little bit.
Sure. Yeah. So as I mentioned briefly, rapamycin comes from a soil bacteria that was found on Easter Island. It's typically synthesized in like a batch culture process from the bacteria, and there are several, you know, companies that do that purification. What was the other question about rapamycin? Sorry. Age-related cognitive dysfunction.
Can it be created in a lab, and do you have a new drug application?
Oh, patent. Yeah. Right. So I mean, it's created by a manufacturing process. It's not typically created in a laboratory by like an organic chemistry synthesis. So rapamycin is off patent. It was first FDA approved in, I think, the mid 1990s, and it's now, it's still, you know, it's a generic, goes by the name of sirolimus or Rapamune in the clinical world. There are a variety of derivatives of rapamycin that people are studying that have some IP around them and some patent protection. You know, we're an academic project. We're not in this to make money. I don't have any problem with making money, but that's not our goal. We're not looking to get a drug FDA approved so that we can, you know, make a lot of money off of it. So we're not seeking FDA approval for rapamycin from our project. I will just briefly mention the formulation of rapamycin that we're using is a specific veterinary formulation. It's enteric coated that a company called Trivium Vet is developing. And they are seeking FDA approval for specific indications, not for aging, around their product. But it's not the molecule itself that's different. It's just the way that it's coated and delivered.
Okay. Thank you for filling our audience and question askers in on that. So that brings us to the end of our time together. I can't thank you both enough for your insight and fascinating information on the work you're doing. I'm really looking forward to following it, and as I'm sure all of our audiences. So thank you, audience, also. And I think we have a slide to show that will pull up about the Dog Aging Project. And Matt or Katie, can you speak to, is this where people go if they want to enroll their dogs, correct?
Yeah. Please go to the website. Please nominate your dog to participate. Please complete HLES and join the Dog Aging Project pack. It'll be fun. It'll be great for science. You will not be disappointed that you did this. So yeah, absolutely. Please go do that.
Definitely. Great. All right. Thank you. And then thank you again, everyone, for joining us. Please join us again at the end of September for our webinar on sex differences in aging. I think that's going to be a really fascinating conversation as well, and lots of fodder for questions. So bring them when you got them. All right. So thanks, everybody. Thanks, Katie and Matt, especially. And I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you.
Go hug your dog.